Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Profitable Steward podcast and the Ag Steward Masterclass. We're grateful to have Sean Cunningham here with us this afternoon. This is recorded live, and yes, you will be able to catch the recording. The best way is to go to the Profitable Ag Steward YouTube channel and watch it there. We also have it goes out on all the podcast channels, the Profitable Steward. And for those that are on here, I'm going to share a link in the chat. We've got an event next week. It's a 2-day class. This is a workshop style class. A lot of our events are summits, more high level. This class next week is for you if you have a business or are starting an agriculture business in the regenerative agriculture space. This is the workshop style where we will take your current business and work on the profitability from an enterprise analysis standpoint, building out a team, all the parts and pieces that you need to either build a successful regenerative business or scale your regenerative agriculture business. So that'll be next week, next Thursday and Friday, and I'll drop the link in the chat here as we go. I'll share that at the end of the recording as well. So, Sean, tell these folks where you're zooming in from today.
Yeah, so we're 30 miles north of Jordan Valley, Oregon, um, in the southeast corner of Oregon, almost right next to Idaho. I mean, practically see Idaho from here. I can see Idaho from my window, actually. Um, and that's background of my, is looking out my window on the other side of the house at our ranch. So, yeah, so I'm fourth generation on this ranch. Um, my family's been here since 1912. After graduating college in 2010, I got married, brought my wife out, and settled down here um, on the ranch working with my dad, and have been here ever since. So, started out just working for him, helping him out. Started managing the cow herd about 2014. My wife Liz, she's a real marketing business type person, and really got going and wanted to start a grass finished beef business. We had been finishing a few head of beef for a neighbor who had grass finished beef, and we just started marketing some on our own, and we built that up over the last 10 years or so. And in 2020, I took over full management of the ranch from my dad, and he's still here helping me out every day. My wife and I have 7 kids from 13 down to 5-month old. So we got a lot of activity going on around here these days.
Yeah, that's cool. So how old were you when you took over from your dad?
I was 34. Yeah, I'd been back
Okay.
on the ranch for 10 years. And that's when I came back from college, we talked about it. My dad has just been really, really good about the transition and everything. He was always been willing for me to try new things on his dime sometimes. Um,
Hmm.
if I could give him a good case of why I thought it would work, we would try it. And then so after being back on the ranch for 10 years, I took over the full management responsibility.
Tell us a little bit about the evolvement of the ranch and I would say that you guys manage in a regenerative manner, but has it always been that way? And kind of how did it start over the last over what is that 115-ish years, 112
Well,
years, something like that?
yeah. So I mean, it really started with my dad being willing to think outside the box, and he read Alan Savory, and he started trying some different things. One thing that's unique about us, we've never used commercial fertilizer on our hay fields. We've never done very much spraying herbicides or anything like that. More recently, we've entirely quit doing that. And then he always dabbled a little bit here and there with some regenerative or with some management intensive grazing. Put in some hot wire back in '93. I think we started subdividing pastures and doing some different things like that. So I really had a good foundation and a good launching point for me to go on and kind of take it to the next level. Like in about 2013 or 14, we started changing the way we managed our irrigated meadows. We started grazing more and feeding less hay, and I'll get into that in a little bit. And then we started, putting those grass finishers on the meadows, using polywire to move them every day, which we still do to this day, and stuff like that. So,
Yeah, cool. So, kind of as the ranch has evolved and grown, and from one generation to the next, has the land base stayed more or less static, or has it grown? Has it shrunk? Has it changed?
it has stayed pretty static. We run about 400 mother cows, and at this point in time, we're keeping majority of the calves through finish. Um, but it's been about the same probably for about the last 80 years. It hasn't changed much. I've added a couple small leases here and there, um, but that's about it. So,
Hmm. And I guess just kind of describe to the for context what your ranch looks like geographically and the carrying capacity. You run a lot on federal land, and so that might be something that's a little different
yep.
than maybe, one of our callers was from way east, where it's probably green year round. And
Yeah, the federal land is on one hand our unfair advantage, and on the other hand our thorn in the side, Achilles heel, so to speak.
yeah.
And so our cow herd is out on the federal land for the most part, about 10 months out of the year. And so we go out the 1st of March, start calving the 1st of March out there, um, and we're out there until Christmas. So it's high desert. We get about 10 to 12 inches of precip, bunch grass, sagebrush rangeland. Some of it's pretty good grass and has pretty good water, and some of it's a long ways from the water to the grass. So
Hmm.
we have to have a cow here that's adapted to that. That can travel. That's not too big, and that can bring home a calf every year. Um, so that's you can see there's that little mountain up behind us in my picture here, and that's where some of our irrigation water comes from. So that comes down to these meadows behind me, um, and we have about 350 acres of irrigated meadows that traditionally would be hayed. We used to hay all of them and use all that hay in the winter to feed the cows. Now, over time, I've been trying to graze more and more of the year so that I can hay less, and cheapen up that cost. I've ended up actually going back and doing more haying than I used to recently because I need the hay for the steers and the grass finishers. Um, those animals that are growing need a little higher plane of nutrition so they can keep growing through the winter.
Hmm.
Uh, but the cow herd ends up range for about 10 months out of the year. And then when they do come home, I have them clean up all the lower quality grass on the meadows, weather dependent. They'll graze all the way through January and February a lot of years. This year I fed them for about a month, it was about a month. But like last year I didn't feed the older from 3 years old and up. They're in the cow herd, and if the weather cooperates and everything, they don't get fed. So in the last 10 years, I've probably averaged half a ton of hay per cow for those girls. And I think that's a really critical thing with a cow calf herd. There's just not enough margin in the cow calf herd to feed those cows very much hay. At least in my opinion, that's been the key to profitability is reducing the fed inputs, the hay, protein supplement, um, whatever else. Anytime you have to go out there and put out feed for that cow, that's costing you money. If she's out there making her own living, finding her own feed, then she's making you money. And so that's been a big push the last few years, the last 10 years, I guess.
Yeah. And so would you say that's to be able to get the cow to perform in your environment? Was that more on the management? Is it more on the genetic selection? epigenetics, what's made it so that you can reduce your winter feeding significantly in a place that's, you guys get winter, right? It's not, I'm,
We
I'm
get
at,
some winter. I mean, I wouldn't claim we get real winter here. I mean, 12 inches of snow is the most I've ever seen, and I've had
okay.
cows grazing through 12 inches of snow, if there's
Mhm.
feed there. Matter of fact, I had one group of cows on a leased piece of ground, and it was a lot of cattails and tall grass, and they were grazing through 24 inches of snow. And I never fed them hay that year. It wasn't maybe the best thing for them, but it was pretty inaccessible, and they had feed, and I hauled protein to them, and they survived and did actually fine
Mhm.
in the end. But generally speaking, we'll get a couple of snowstorms, sometimes ice. Ice is the worst. That's when I'll have to feed, is when you get some snow and rain on top of it, and then it freezes. Um, so I try to have at least a month's worth of hay on hand for those cows if I need it. But it's partly management and partly genetics for sure, because you have to plan. If you're going to graze in the winter, you have to plan to graze in the winter. You have to leave grass for them to eat in the winter. Um,
Mhm.
so that can mean either running fewer cows year round, or or doing something. Um, for me, that means, because I have the grass finishers on my irrigated meadows, starting about August or July, I guess, really. Um, I'll start out with more cattle, more finishers at the beginning of the summer, and then I'll butcher some every month. And so as we get
Mhm.
along through the summer, and I have a little bit extra. I don't know how to say it exactly. I'll start Once you get into July. There's a lot of fescue in these meadows, and they don't want to eat it much. So I'll just let them leave it, and it'll just grow. And
Mhm.
basically, whatever they don't want to eat is coarse and whatnot. I'll just let that grow and try to kind of balance how much I think I'm going to need for winter. Um, but that fescue, if you have fescue, I mean, that stuff's amazing. I didn't even know uh, 10, 15 years ago that we had fescue here, but it'll hold its value, and it's actually more palatable in the wintertime. And it'll stand up. All the other grasses, and by January, February, they'll tip over and turn brown, but the
Mhm.
fescue will still be standing up, and most of the time it'll have some green leaves underneath there. So that's a big part of it. And then the other part, though, is having cows that can handle that, and because it does take adapted genetics to do that. If you want, I could get into how I select and have built up this cow herd that way.
Yeah, yeah, I think let's come back to that. Before we go there, let tell folks what your enterprise mix is, and do you have a core centerpiece enterprise?
Yeah, I mean, the cow calf is still the centerpiece. I mean, that's the bread and butter. Everything else kind of spins off of that. Like I said, we keep all of our heifers for the most part, finish a bunch of them out, and then steers. It depends on the year and the market, whether how many of those we keep and how many we need for our marketing business. But we'll keep a lot of the steers and finish them on grass. And then on top of that, we also have pastured pigs. In the past, we still have a handful of sheep. At one point in time, we had some ewes, quite a few ewes, but we only have like 8 now. Um, and that's the main stuff on the ranch.
Okay. Yeah. So everything primary, well, not everything is direct marketed, but is the bulk of what the ranch produces sold direct to consumer?
Yeah, yeah, probably. Well, last year we did, out of 100. I'm trying to think on the top of my head. I should have. Yeah, probably at least half of the calves we raise on that are born on the ranch will end up getting finished here. It's hard to
Mhm.
calculate because so many go to replacements, and then whatever. We end up, I think, doing 120 fat fat cattle last year, um, through the direct marketing business.
Nice. Yeah, and then the cull cows, or they stay and go through the ground and sold direct to consumer as well.
Yeah, yeah, we're doing all of them now. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, with well, so somebody asked in the chat here how many acres per cow on average, and I know that varies. Just in the background screen, it's going to vary quite a bit from
Yeah,
uh,
right.
where, depending on where you're at, right?
Yep. So the rangeland around here is generally about 10 acres per cow. Um, Although it's pretty understocked just the way the BLM has it set up. And then, like up on that mountain back there, and I said 10 acres per cow, but that's 10 acres per cow per month. Um, on that mountain up there, we have some private ground, and that's, I think, about 3 to 4 acres per cow per month up there on that private ground. And then down on the bottom in the irrigated meadows, that's pretty comparable to anywhere in the Midwest, as far as you could probably summer a cow on an acre, or so,
Hmm.
depending on which field it is, and how productive it is. There's a lot of variation there too.
Hmm.
Um, that one field right behind me in the picture, I can put up about 3 to 4 tons of hay on the first cutting in that field, but if you go down
Wow.
country a half a mile, I'll only get 1.5 or 2. Just
Hmm.
depends on the field and what the soil's like.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about how you have made the cows work in the environment, your selection process, and how that works.
Yeah, so I mean, I think having a herd that's adapted to your environment and to your management, is really important. And so, I mean, I really have to give credit to my dad again for starting this way back in the 80s and 90s. His initial focus was on calving these genetics, and he got so that by the year 2000, we started turning all our heifers out, first calf heifers out with the cows on the range, 20 miles from home, and never going to look at them since. It's been 25 years we've done that.
Huh.
And so that was the first thing. And then more recently, I've been focusing on trying to, well, I've changed my management and fed less hay and grazed more days through the year. So that's necessitated an adaptation in the genetics over time. And we've had some fallout. Some years we've had a lot of fallout. Um, but I mean, my dad was the one who told me the philosophy. He's like, if you say you have 50% that come up open, well, you just found out which were the best half of your cow herd that could survive on that genetics. Now, hopefully, we don't have that. We have had a couple years when it was pretty low, especially on the heifers. But to get in what the way I do things, I mean, it really starts with those heifers. Um, one being on their mothers, but then especially I think as yearlings, everybody talks about developing heifers. Well, I think we need to not develop heifers, um, or at least that's my philosophy. So I keep almost all the heifers. I'll keep 90% of them just stored off the dinks, the ones that you don't want to keep that got sick or something. And then they all get turned out with their mothers for the summer. And like I turned them out here the other day and they were weighing 450 pounds in the middle of February. So we had a pretty, I'll admit, we had a pretty tough year last year. They're probably about 100 pounds behind what they usually are. But it doesn't really matter because what we'll do is they'll go out with the cows. What gets bred gets bred. And then next year, we'll wait. We'll just leave them with the cows. I may pull them off in the winter, depending on the year, and give them a little extra feed through the winter so that they're ready to calve. And that'll be really the only time they get a little special treatment. Um, but after they calve in the spring, anything that doesn't have a calf for whatever reason, will get pulled off and they'll go onto the irrigated meadows for grass finishing. And then again, as you know, with that first calf on them, they're still with the cows, being a cow. Um, Whatever breeds, breeds. They'll come around again, sort off the dries the next spring, and finish those as 3-year-olds. And those are actually really good eating. I was a little nervous when we started doing that, but as long as they have plenty of time to get fat, we have not had any quality issues finishing 3-year-olds. And so, on the average, I'd say I think we get about 80% of our replacement heifers will get bred. And then when that first calf is on their side, we have an average of about 70% breed up there. So in the
Hmm.
first 2 years, we'll lose about 50% of them
Hmm.
that won't breed. But that's good because then I just found out I found out which were the better half of the heifers, which most people keep about half their heifers anyway. But
Yeah.
most of the time, you're just randomly picking heifers based on what they look like, and you don't really know if they can handle your environment. And then two, I found out which ones are the best ones while they're still young enough to be valuable to be able to finish on grass and sell as premium beef. And then from that point on, my older cows, I mean, they're from three and up, they usually are between 90 and 95% bred until they're about 12, 13, 14 years old. Um, they just, the ones that make it through that testing period as young heifers, they're really good cows. And they're cows you can be proud of having around.
Yeah. That is a really wise management plan, and makes a ton of sense. You just kind of you let nature select what's going to work best, and you
Yep.
don't presume to think that all the pretty ones are going to be the best ones, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And sometimes it's that scrawny little horn thing that you wish you thought you should have put on the truck to sell as a calf that has a calf every year. And the fat, uh, the fat pretty ones, you can't pick them. In my opinion, we
uh-huh.
can't pick as humans. What will fit in our environment. What we have to do
Yeah.
is just test them and see what works. Um, I was
What about the bull selection side, Sean? What do you
Yeah,
think there?
that's a tough one for a lot of people because I think you really have to find bulls that come from cows that are run in an environment that's as tough as yours or harder, because
Yeah.
otherwise you're bringing in genetics that are pulling your cow herd the wrong direction. You know,
Mhm.
you're most people, and I understand why, but most bull genetics are feedlot genetics. They're designed for that steer calf going to the feedlot, and that works good for that. But if you're keeping heifers out of those bulls, you're constantly pulling your genetics the wrong direction, and then your environment is selecting the other direction. So sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. But for us, my dad started raising our own bulls years ago. And for the most part, up until recently, we used AI to bring in genetics that we liked, but of course, raise those calves off of our cows. So they were half our genetics, but the other half was pulling our cow herd the way we wanted. More recently, I basically just got tired of AI and thought we were pretty much where I wanted to be anyway. So I'll just run through that real quick. What I do now is I'll save 50, so that's about 25% of the bulls that are born. I'll save the first 25% that are born. So the ones that are born first part of March. And I'll just leave them bulls, and then we come around to weaning and wintertime, some point in time before the next spring, I'll run them all through the corral and just do a quick split on them. Maybe split them 50-50. The ones I like that look like bulls that are showing testosterone, um, and then cut the smaller half that don't look as good. But just a really quick sort. I don't try to worry about it at that point in time. And then when they're 15 months old, when I'm right before breeding season, I'm testing my other bulls. I'll go through them again, sort off stuff I don't like the looks of, uh, for whatever their phenotype, their structure, whatever, and then I'll semen test those, the ones I keep. And usually, like last year, I had to end up with 11 out of 50 that passed those two tests and passed their semen test. Then I just
Mhm.
take those 11 and turn them out with cows and forget about them for the next year. And then this spring, as 2 year olds, those 11 will come through the chute. And I've actually sorted off a couple already. There was a couple last summer I didn't, they got crippled, whatever. Sort them off, castrate them, put them with the steers.
Yeah.
Um, and then as 2 year olds, whatever's left, I think I've got 8 right now. They'll get semen tested again, and I'll look at them really close and just pick 2 or 3 or 4 that I'm like, I want those to stay in my herd for the next 5 years. Um, and then the other 3 or 4, I have a neighbor that buys them sometimes, or sometimes I'll even castrate them as 2-year-olds and still finish them out. They
Hmm.
don't put on a lot of fat, but they still do some. Um, and so that's how I select for bulls, and it seems to be working pretty good. I know if you were to go through my calf crop, you'll see a few more dinks and calves that are maybe a little bit, the cross was too close or something. Um, and I try to find those mothers and get rid of them. But overall, we're getting genetics that work for our environment, and that's the number one for us. So,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think if you can find somebody that raises bulls in a tough environment, well, yeah, or their cows at least are in a tough environment, I'd go ahead and buy those. But the problem is, most of these bulls you find at the bull sales, they've been fed a lot of grain, which destroys their feet, destroys their fertility in the long run.
Hmm.
And they're from cows that were raised on irrigated pasture or whatnot, and they're not genetics that are going to be adapted to your environment usually.
Hmm. Yeah. How, if somebody's just starting out and, wanting to go down the route to make their cow herd fit their environment, um, what would you advise them so that they maybe don't get in that wreck where they have a huge conception rate issue, or sometimes it just, we push our cows too hard and they're not ready for that,
Yeah.
and we're not ready economically to be able to sustain uh you know 70% or 80% breed up.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a tough one because I mean you do have to be cautious about it. And I've been a little bit. I've made those mistakes before. I've had those years when I was like, I push these cows too hard. So you do have to be cognizant of anytime you make a change. It doesn't matter whether it's feeding less protein or feeding more protein, or just any change you make at all is going to affect the cow herd and those epigenetics over time. And
Hmm.
so you have to be aware of that and just not get into not not make changes too fast if you're concerned about that. I don't really know what to say except that I think I would start with the heifers. I don't think the bulls matter so much in the long haul as those heifers. Finding heifers that fit your management style and your environment both. You know, I think that's the biggest mistake people make is just picking the top, the prettiest 40 or 50% and selling all the rest without having a clue which heifers will actually thrive in their environment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. I appreciate you talking through genetic
You know,
selection.
and on that note with heifers, we have that is one of the reasons we got our grass-fed beef business going was to take those heifers that didn't fit our program and to make something valuable out of them. If you don't
Hmm.
have that going, there are other ways to do it. I know Burke Teichert and others, recommend like a 30-day, 45-day breeding window on those yearling heifers, and then
Hmm.
a month later you can get them ultrasounded, and the ones that aren't bred can go straight to the feeder market. 8 weight feeder heifers usually, and they'll do pretty good. And then those older cows, say the 2-year-olds that don't breed back, um, one thing you can do with them if you want to, if you have the grass, is actually keep them, rebreed them, and then sell them as 4-year-old cows. Really good cows. They're going to be in good shape because they had a whole year off,
Hmm.
um, and they're going to sell for top dollar, as rebreeders to
Hmm.
somebody, and they're going to go to somebody, and they're going to do a really good job for somebody. Because anytime I have, and just a handful of times I've kept one of those around kind of by accident, they make a great cow for the next 10 years. Um,
Okay.
but they missed that one year, so you really don't want their genetics passing on if you can help it. Um, but they'll do a really good job for somebody else usually.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there any merit in calving as 3-year-olds, in your opinion?
I don't think so. I think unless you have, I mean, I've heard people with Brahmas, or something like that, that they need more time to grow up. I think actually, I mean, people can pencil it any way they want to. I think a lot of times if you take those, like if you were to take my heifers and keep them and wait till 3 to calve, you get 98% of them to calve the first year, and they probably calve 95% every year after that. Um, but you do have that whole year that you have to hold them and feed them, and I don't know.
Try try to keep them open or
Yeah,
little
well,
or something.
that's impossible around here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, man, logistically, that's just kind of a
You have
tough
to
deal.
lock them in a feedlot, and even then, I don't know if that would be good enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's switch gears here just a little bit and talk about overall management. First, from a workload standpoint, um, do you have any metrics by which you measure efficiency for your enterprise per, FTE, full-time equivalent? And how does how do you divide up the workload on your operation? Can you talk a little bit about the labor aspect?
Yeah, I don't really have any metrics, and it's changed so much from year to year, depending on what we have going on.
Hmm.
Um, One of the reasons that I actually started, or maybe it's more of a side benefit of actually starting the enterprise with the pigs and partly the grass finishing, um, is because that extra margin helps pay for an employee.
Yeah.
For a long time, it was just my dad and I, and my brothers helped some before they left, before they finished college or high school. But I think from 2010 to 2020 was pretty much just my dad and I, and my brothers occasionally. And um, when I took over the ranch, I knew I wanted to one allow my dad to slow down and not have to be there every day, and also I wanted myself to have the ability to not have to be here every day. So we started hiring one employee in 2020, I think it was, and that's been game changer for us. From financial side, it's there's been a couple times like in the winter I've been like last year I was in between employees and I thought I don't really need a guy in the winter. I just got to do is feed cow. I didn't have to feed cows that last year. I didn't have. I just had some heifers to feed and just move some polywire every day. It wasn't a big deal. But tell you what, by the end of the winter, I was thinking I really could use a full time employee in the winter, just because there's just a million little things that come up, and then if you want to be, go to town, but you have to get up early and go move the cows and or whatever. I mean, I think it's really important for that work life balance to have a bit of a, at least somewhat of a team, as that you can at least shift responsibilities and not have to be responsible for all of it. But that means that you have to have a revenue base that's big enough to do that. And so sometimes, bringing in things like pastured pigs or just the marketing business in general, or other enterprises like that. Actually, for the first year in 2020, we did a lot of custom fencing for some neighbors. The first employee and I did because I don't know where all that time went. I don't seem to have that extra time anymore.
Yeah. Well, um, uh, you've got a lot going on. Tell people a little bit more about what else is going on. I mean, you on
Yeah,
the direct marketing side and the grocery store, and your wife is very entrepreneurial, and I think
yeah,
she makes that
yeah.
work. And watching you guys, it kind of seems easy because I may I don't
Well,
know, maybe just have your game face on when we visit you, but I don't see that you're overly stressed out like maybe other people are that are juggling so many
yeah, yeah,
businesses and enterprises, and it's just like it gets to be where it's not fun anymore, and sometimes not
right,
even profitable. So
right.
talk a little bit about what else
Well,
you
and that's always been a key for us. I mean, we've always wanted it. We've always wanted it to be fun, and we enjoy business, so that helps. But we have 7 kids at this point in time, so we've always made a priority of having family time and being home for dinner every night. I mean, that's just non-negotiable. Sometimes it might be 7 o'clock, but or 8 o'clock, but usually dinner's at 6 o'clock and everybody's here. So that's always been a priority on the front end, and so that anything we pursue has to fit that priority first. And so, I mean, to back up a little bit, like I said, about 2014, we started raising some grass finished beef, just selling to friends and neighbors, um, and then slowly growing that. I think about 2018 or 19, we kind of stepped up our game, started doing, um, started using the USDA butcher so that we could bring the beef home and then sell it in, individual cuts. And we started doing home delivery in Boise, and that was when we took on a part-time employee in Boise to handle all that, and that was part of it. I think a lot of people, when they go into direct marketing, the first thing they do is get some big chest freezers at home, and they do that fulfillment at home. And we knew, being, well, we're 60 miles, we're 80 miles from Boise, where the big population center is. We just knew that wasn't going to work. It didn't make sense to haul the beef down, get it butchered, haul it back, and then package it and haul it back down again. So, just right from the get go, there we found cold storage facilities. We found a part time employee who could package the orders and deliver them, and so we've always had somebody to help on that side, and we've never been involved. I think in the last 10 years, or well, it hasn't been 10 years since we started doing the home deliveries, but in 8 years or whatever it's been, I did one set of deliveries 1 week because our employee was sick or something. And I've helped pack orders twice, maybe. And my wife has done it maybe 10 times. I mean, and it was really her business and getting it set up. But so that's been a big part of it, multiplying ourselves through other people. And
Mhm.
and then I think, let's see, 2.5. So in 2022, the opportunity came up to buy a small grocery store. It's just a little mom and pop grocery store that specialized in local produce and organic produce. And they didn't really have much of a meat selection there. There was one, they had some meat, but not a lot. So we bought that grocery store, and that again has been my wife's project. We have about 15 employees there. A lot of them are part time, but um, it's been uh, it's been a bit of a challenge, figuring that out, and but it's been really good at the same time because it dovetails with our other businesses. And it had a warehouse there on site that we're able to put a freezer in, so we have our own meat storage there, and we can pack orders from that location. So everything's kind of fit together as we go along to complement each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, we'll just pause here for a minute. I found the link to the event. It's events.agsteward.co. I dropped that in the chat. This is the event next week. Things that Sean's been talking about, working together as a family, creating profitable businesses, finding that balance in our enterprise mixes, meaning, what fits our environment, what fits our lifestyle, what fits our strengths and our skill set. Those are the things that we're going to be talking about next week, and not high level things of just like, hey, here's the theory. It's going to be more like, okay, how does this actually apply to your business? So if you go to that link that I just shared, and that's an easy registration page. And so, uh, so share that again. Okay, so back to it here, Sean. Um, where do you see yourselves going? Like, you know, so I've had the privilege of working with Sean and his wife Liz over the last year. They actually went to one of these classes, a little over a year ago, I think it was, when we started
Mhm.
working together. And so we've talked about, you know, um, the 10X principle. That's something from Dan Sullivan. Just because you can 10X doesn't mean you should, right? And so for you guys, what does that what does the vision look like? What does the growth look like? What do you guys foresee?
Well, it's hard to foresee the future, we've always wanted to one of our big things has always been to help people bring good quality food to people. Um, and that's why we've grown the marketing business over time. And it's grown pretty organically. I mean, buying the grocery store was a big leap, but it was kind of an organic process. Um, the idea of 10xing when we first started thinking about it was a little scary because that's big.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, in every step that we've kind of gone through, it always is easier in the long run if you're big enough to have a team to work with, so that responsibilities aren't all on your plate. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest struggles that people have, probably a lot of people that are listening have, is they're the one that has to do it all. And that's stressful. That's stressful because if you don't get up in the morning, it doesn't get done.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just need to sleep in. Sometimes you just need to take a day and go do something with the kids. And so, in the long run, um, growth can be really beneficial, but it has to be structured and planned as far as to make sure you're moving toward your goals, and not just growing for the sake of growth. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. We encourage our clients to get really clear on what their vision is, what their values are, and not
Mhm.
compromise on those as they move forward and as they continue to grow. And so
Yeah.
I think you guys are excellent examples of that, especially when you started the direct marketing company and as you shared that, it wasn't going to come at the sacrifice of your family from day one.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of
And
us,
even to this day, I mean, with the grocery store, Liz is only gone 1 or 2 days a week usually,
Mhm.
to go check in with her team and work there, and the rest of the time we're working together. And it's interesting when I first came back to the ranch, and first started, really diving into this business. I really wanted to grow the ranch. I wanted to lease another ranch, find some way to buy a ranch. I wanted to grow the cow herd. Um, and time and time again, God just said, no, it's not, that's not what I want from you. And it took me a long time to accept that. It really did, because I always wanted to, have 1,000 cows or whatever.
Yeah.
And we still just have 400 cows. Between my dad and I, we have 400 cows, same number of cows we've had for the last 80 years, 3 generations. And, but it works. And we've worked on making it more profitable at the rate we're at, the level we're at. But when it came down to opportunities to expand, I turned down, I can't tell you how many, multiple opportunities, um, because they were too far from home. You know, I turned down leases, I turned down different things that, I would have either have to been on the road a lot or had employees that were, over there and me here and back and forth. And it just wasn't going to work out with my family and my goals for my family. Um, it just wasn't going to fit if it wasn't. And it turned out, that if it's not right in my backyard, it's not going to work to expand the ranch. And so I finally, over the last few years, I finally, um, come to accept that and realize that there's other opportunities for growth and expansion. And actually now, with our marketing business, we're serving way more people and bringing quality food to people directly, rather than just raising 1,000 calves that just get sold and don't have any, you know and then there's no follow through on that. So, um, it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. With on the direct marketing side, I know Liz takes care of a lot of the marketing, but for you guys in taking that on, what what was the biggest pain point or maybe unforeseen challenge? For us, it was has always been the marketing, um, followed closely by processing, and then third would be fulfillment. Just
Mhm.
being able to get the delivery, and you talked a little bit about that, but for maybe others who are looking at, hey, is this enterprise right for me? Anything that you could share there to help them to know maybe the unforeseen challenges of running a direct to consumer business.
Well, I mean, probably the thing that jumps out to me is working with people. I mean, if
Yeah.
you don't enjoy working with employees and working with customers all the time, and especially with employees, it seems like there's always some kind of drama, always something, and that has to be worked through. So personally, I really don't um, enjoy working with employees too much overall. And I have one really good employee, and he's great, and I really enjoy working with him. But that was another part of not expanding the ranch is I couldn't imagine trying to manage employees remotely on another ranch. It just wasn't in my wheelhouse. But for Liz, she thrives on that sort of thing. She thrives on people, relationships, and and then as we've grown, now we actually have a manager at the store who actually deals with most of those relationships on a daily basis. So that's also a big benefit of growth is to be able to have other people to handle those things that need to be handled. But as far as the rest of it goes, Liz would be a lot more a better one to speak to about that. But it's all worked out pretty good over time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. That's good. Um,
Major steps. It's processing and some of the um, other stuff has been a little bit difficult at times, but it's just your normal business.
yeah. Um, well, let's touch a little bit on the profitability side, if you're okay with that. What are there any key metrics that you measure when it comes to the economics of your overall ranch, of your enterprises, and how do you measure those? Um, you seem to be a pretty astute numbers guy. You understand that, which I think for a lot of farmers and ranchers, that is not our strength. For you, I don't know if it came naturally or if that's just something that you learned from.
I
Uh,
put on a good face. No.
okay. Well, I've
No,
seen your sheets. You're
yeah, I have
you've
some
been
pretty good
honest.
spreadsheets that other people have helped me develop. Um, and the main thing there, I would guess, is making sure is knowing what your gross margins are on each enterprise. And that comes back to that reducing your hay costs and stuff because those are your biggest those input costs, is what is where the biggest struggle there is. But yeah, knowing your being able to calculate your gross margins and then making sure that you have enough gross margin overall through all your enterprises to cover all your overheads and have a
Mhm.
profit at the end of the year. And so I usually start out the year in the wintertime by kind of going through those numbers and projecting what I think and not using best case scenarios, but just kind of an average scenario of market prices and making sure that I think I can cover looks like going forward we can cover, you know, pay all our bills and have a profit left over at the end of the year. And
Mhm.
uh and if you can start the year off that way, um things always change. Never follow. It never works out exactly the way you said it think it's going to, but at least you have a basis to start on and know that you're starting in the right direction. Because I mean, pigs would be a good example of this of an enterprise that could easily, end up costing you money in the end. If not, if and so like because you've got a lot, you have to buy all your feed, you have to buy the piglets, and then you put them on your place, you raise them up, and then you got to know what your end. You should, if you're marketing yourself, you'll know what your end price is going to be. But you have to
Mhm.
have a pretty significant margin in there of profit because you can have some. we've had several cases of pneumonia and different things come through our pigs, and we lose quite a few pigs in a hurry. Um, so you have to kind of you don't know what's going to happen in the end, but another big part of it is when you get to the end and you look at that profit and you think about how much work is going to go into it. You think about, well, if I'm doing this work, is that is that profit at the end worth my time and my energy? If it's not, if it's you're doing all this work for $5,000 at the end of the year to to your bottom line, it's like, why bother? I also obviously depends on your scale, but I think that's really important. A lot of people, a lot of farmers and ranchers will look at break evens. They're like, well, like break even is $500 a head or whatever, and what's the point of break even? We don't want to break even. If we're gonna break even, we might as well just stay home.
Sure. Nothing for nothing rather than work really hard for nothing, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's really important to plan for a profit, um, and to pencil that in. And even even it's also really important to pay yourself for your time as you go along, so that that you're. I mean, if you can't pay yourself as you go along, you might need to reevaluate your structure. You know.
Yeah. And so do you expect your enterprises to pay like fair market wage? How do you calculate what your wage should be? Is it based on what it would cost to replace yourself or
Yeah, it's just a flat. It's just a what's a ranch manager worth? I mean, I
yeah.
don't get into the details too much, like, on those different enterprises. You could, depending on. For me, it's more about just making sure that each enterprise has a positive gross margin that's substantial, and is contributing to your overheads. And then after the overheads are all paid and you pay yourself and pay your, you know, pay your ranch lease, even if that's to yourself. But in my case, it's to my
Probably
parents,
some- Yeah.
um, and there should be something left over at the end of the year.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. Well, Francois asked, how much do you charge per pound or on the bulk side on the kind of
Yeah, that's really a question for my wife. I think we're up around for total packaged weight. I think we're up around $11 a pound, um, and that's for finished packaged weight.
yep, yep. And then how old are your cattle when you butcher them?
Anywhere. So I'll start butchering the steers at 2 years old. Um, so right at 24 months, and then I'll butcher them all the way up through 40 months, just depending. The heifers will be the ones that are butchered older. The steers are usually between 24 and 36. I just sorted off the last of the steers to go to butcher they'll be 30. Well, they were probably born late in the calving season, so they're probably 34 months old or something like that. Um,
Okay.
but one of the things that's a little bit different about us, and for good or for bad, I mean, with a low input mindset, I never really have got into the idea of pushing my steers. Um, and there's probably some money to be made there feeding them better in the winter and keeping them gaining through the winter. But I've just, grass alfalfa through the winter and just keep them maintaining through the winter. And then when they hit grass in the spring, they pack it on. Um,
Hmm.
and they'll grow really good from May through October or so, or November, depending on the year. But so that's why they're so old. They're quite a bit older when they're butchered. But uh, you know, time is money, but hay is also money. So
Yeah.
take your
Yeah.
pick.
Yeah, it's kind of a balance and
Yeah.
okay, well, a couple other topics and then we'll wrap up. Um, what would you suggest for young people just starting out? if they, you and I, we both were blessed to be able to come back to our parents' places. But that's not everybody has that opportunity.
Yep.
You get this question asked, boy, every event that we do. How does a young person get started? And not just a young person, how does, middle age and older person get started?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. It's not easy for sure, but I have seen multiple people in the last 10 years start ranching from scratch. It takes time, and it really helps to have a good community of people who can help you, give you ideas and stuff too. But I think the first thing to do is to find a job on a ranch that's the kind of ranch you want to, develop yourself. And then the tricky part is always finding the land. That's always the hard part. You know, um, you have to talk to a lot of people. You have to get your name out there. You have to get to know people. But I do know several people that have found ranches or small properties or whatever that they could lease and then just grow it over time. I mean, usually if you're starting from scratch, you're gonna have to have a job of some sort for a long time. But
Hmm.
I know, yeah, like I said, I know several families that have started from scratch over the last 10, 15, 20 years. So it can be done, but you have to have that vision. You have to you have to keep driving for it.
Yeah, no doubt. And I know those as well. I also know people who are on the other end who are looking at a transition, looking for a successor, and they don't have anybody.
Yep.
So go get that experience, young men, young women. Go work for, go work on ranches, get the experience, go to the schools, attend our classes, get get the education, so that when that opportunity arises, that I can recommend you. Right
Yeah.
now, I've got somebody, awesome opportunity to step right into it, if they have the skill set and the desire, and be like, man, okay, let's see who rises to the top here. And so, amen to what you said there. It's probably the last question I have, and then we'll share again about our event next week, and then we'll wrap up. Is who've been your mentors along the way, Sean?
Oh boy, there's been a lot of them. Several people from the Ranching for Profit organization, Dave Pratt and Dallas Mount, were big influences on me early on. Um, and then my dad. I mean, really, um, ultimately, he's been the biggest help. Other people I enjoy watching and learning from include Glenn Elzinga with Alder Spring Ranch,
Yeah,
um, and Greg Judy. I've read pretty much every book that's come out. Alan Savory was actually the one that really kicked off my love of grass and grass ranching because I read his book when I was about 14 probably, and ever since then I wanted to grow grass, make the land better, and to do what I could that way. I see in the chat somebody was asking Glenn who. Glenn Elzinga. I don't know if I could even spell it, but just look up Alder Spring Ranch in Salmon, Idaho, May, Idaho. They raise organic beef up there.
yeah, you got a really good social media presence, and yeah, they're good. They're good marketers, good at what they do. So very
Yeah.
cool. Uh,
Also, on the marketing side, Seven Sons Farm out of Indiana helped us a lot with the marketing, and became personal friends of ours. And they do a great job with what they do um, back there in Indiana.
nice, nice. Well, again, this is our event next week. Just a reminder, welcome to join us. We encourage you to. It's called the Profitable Steward. It's a 2-day workshop. Here's the deliverables that you'll walk away with: developing a stewardship mindset, um, talk about stewardship quite a bit. That might be something to ponder on what your definition of stewardship is, Sean. We're going to talk about the profitability framework. Um, you know, we can hope for profit, but if we don't, like what Sean articulated so well, if we don't plan for it, and if we don't know what the components of profit really are and even how to measure it, the likelihood of achieving profit is pretty slim. We're going to contrast working on versus working in the business, the whole aspect of building a team, and especially when that team involves your family. Cash flow versus net worth is many of us in agriculture, we have a huge net worth, but a negative cash flow on an annual basis. And that can lead to challenges. And we'll talk about how to be able to overcome that so we don't run out of cash. And then on to balancing production and profitability in ranching and farming. We are extremely productive, but oftentimes not very profitable, especially when you remove some of the external inputs that we have, government subsidies, unpaid, underpaid labor, some of those things that if you chalk up the true economic cost of our businesses, a lot of times it's not in the black. So there's the details. You just click on the little deal there. 47 bucks. This is a $500 class. We offer it to those that are on our events for $47. And it is a 2 full day commitment, but it's an opportunity to bring your family, bring your team, so you can work together and walk away with the framework for a business that will grow. Um, all right. So, Sean, maybe we'll wrap up and then we'll grab some of these questions from the chat. But I'd love to hear what your definition of stewardship is.
That's a good one that I actually haven't spent too much time thinking about directly, but I think it's more of a philosophy of life for me that we're put on this earth to take care of the things that we're given, um, and we need to make them better. So when it comes to the land, always striving to make it, grow more grass, make it healthier, better water cycle, cattle that fit our environment and are moving in the right direction. And then personally, I mean, we have so many different things that are given to us: our families, our finances, and I think it really is our duty to take those things that are given to us and to multiply them and to use them to benefit other people. And it's okay to make a profit while you're doing that, because you take that profit and you use that money to benefit more people. I mean, that's the way the
Mhm.
marketing business grows, and that's the way, you know, even as everything grows, the whole point is to benefit people. For us, I mean, we've got our vision over here. I guess you call it our vision. And it's connecting people to real food and regenerative agriculture through faithful stewardship. So I guess that's not a definition of stewardship because stewardship's in it, but
Mhm.
that's what we're trying to do, is to make the land better and to get real food out to more people.
Love it. Well, that's great. Well, we appreciate you being on here today, Sean. Thanks to those who have joined us here live and those that are watching the replay on YouTube or the podcast channels. So that link that I shared that'll go in the show notes. Uh, some of you may be listening after March 21st and 22nd when the class actually happened. That should take you to the next class, which would be in May. So go ahead and click on that and invite you to join us. But um, yeah, we appreciate it, Sean, and pray that you and your family will continue to be blessed on your regenerative journey.